All right, excellent afternoon to all those who are watching me across the states in Nigeria. They said the future of democracy in any society is to be able to give the people the choice of governance that gives the people, inclusivity in the decision-making process. And when we lose the inclusivity of the people from the stage of choice of leadership, the question arises on the types of governance we are practicing. Again, I say welcome to another interesting episode of Real Talk with Kike. I remain your convener and, of course, the chief host, the script writer, name it, the executive producer of the show, and my name remains Kike Atanda. I think it's important for us to hear what on this day in history segment asked for us. And when I return, I give my own 2 cents on it, and the show will continue. Stay with me, I'll be right back. All right, many thanks for staying with us. I think my takeaway from on this day in history segment today is because in today's Nigeria, as we grapple with political, economic, societal, or social challenges, we must reflect on the unity that we share in terms of the vision that drives or that drove the independence movement and the dreams of our founding fathers, so to speak, were centered on a Nigeria where there is equity, justice, progressive, reign. And as we move forward, I believe that their sacrifices should inspire us to rebuild a nation that truly works for all Nigerians. I think that's my takeaway from on this day initial segment. It's time for us to get a message from my sponsors, and when I return, we'll dive straight to the issue at hand. Stay with me, I'll be right back. All right, many thanks for staying with us. The People's Democratic Party has officially rejected the Edo State governorship election results announced by the Independent National Electoral Commission. And the Independent National Electoral Commission announced on Saturday that Senator Monday Okpobolo of the All Progressive Congress won the Edo State governorship election, and Senator Monday received over 291 votes, defeating the PDP's Aswe Godalo, who gathered over 247 votes as well, over 247,000 votes, and the Labour Party's Olumide Akpata, who came in the third with 22,000 votes. On the live show today, my real talk will revolve around the just concluded election in the Edo State, the key issues surrounding the 2024 Edo State gubernatorial election. Discussion will focus on the political godfatherism, federal influence, INEC's performance. What else again will I be touching on? I think the security oversight and, of course, the credibility of the election. I will also examine the voters' apathy when it comes to vote buying, economic hardship, and the role of media campaigns in shaping outcome. Additionally, the show will address the judicial roles or the judicial's role in election disputes and the broader implications of real politics in Nigerian elections today. These topics will provide critical insights into the challenges and the realities of Nigeria's democratic process. But before we delve into Real Talk with my guest today, I think it's important for us to play his profile. And when I return, we will be speaking with him. Please stay with me. I'll be right back. All right, many thanks for staying with me. Let me use this opportunity to quickly usher in my guest, Mr. Ezenwa. It's a pleasure to have you via our studio in Abuja today. Many thanks for creating time to join us today. How are you doing today, sir? Let's start from there.
Excellent. I'm delighted to be on your program, and thank you for having me.
Many thanks for honoring my invitation. So let's just dive straight to the issue. And I think that I want to open this conversation with the words of Abdullahi Ganduje, that's the APC national chairman, who said that the party would use its template in Edo State to win the November 16 election in Ondo State. What do you think it meant or it means by that template?
Yeah, I would not be hazarding into any guess into what's in the mind of the chair of the APC. I would be more interested in looking at the process, because outcomes are actually what partisans are more after. It's possible to have a bad outcome produce a bad process produce a good outcome. It is also possible for a good outcome to produce, for a good process to produce a bad outcome. So whatever template they used is within their domain. But I'm going to be talking about first the fact that the Edo 2024 election did not resonate with the before analysis that we had about what it would look like, that it was going to be violent prone, it was going to be war, it was going to be some kind of Armageddon. But when the polls opened at 8:30 a.m., only about 17% of voters, INEC officials were available at 8:30 a.m. and by 9:30 to 10 thereabout, it upped to about less than 30%. But what was important is that INEC mitigated that by extending the time for closing of polls, which is 2:30 p.m., and that anybody who is on the line will be allowed to vote. Materials did not get had to reach areas in Edo State on time. In Edo North, about 68% delay in materials getting there, and in some other parts, less than 30%. Right. So in terms of looking at process, we will say that the polls opened relatively peacefully, and then accreditation and voting also went on smoothly. And again, the beavers, 95% in the places where it's been deployed according to different reports of observer groups. And counting also progressed relatively well. The dim side of all of these was the obscene use of money that almost everybody, the media and civil society and observer groups and organizations that were in Edo State had reported. And it's not something new. In 2016, Edo was the first place we saw a brazen use of money at the presence of the polling unit, indeed aided even by security agents. And in 2020, that repeated again. And 2024, that became the diminishing point for the integrity of the electoral process. And then collation, as you know, after mining results from the polling units, then uploaded to the IREV, and then manual collations happened at the LGA, and there were reports of intimidation of INEC officials, and indeed even some violence. So in terms of integrity of the election, even if it is just 1% of what I have described at the collation center, it dimmed the integrity of the process. So outcomes, like I said, are for partisans. And they can, whichever way it is, when people lose election, they quarrel with the process. When they win, they celebrate. If it were the other way around, they would not be talking about templates.
All right, many thanks for bringing us to speed, and of course for that elaborate submission regarding what transpired in Edo State. I know that you were on ground and you covered so many places, but putting that aside now, the fallout between Governor Obaseki and his former political godfather is what I want to touch on, because earlier when you were giving your submission about outcomes for partisan, Oshiomole played a major role in the political dynamics of Edo State. How much influence do you think the political godfatherism still holds in Edo State politics? And did he ultimately decide the outcome of the 2024 gubernatorial election? Is my first question to you. And my second question is the fact that I would like to touch on the federal might versus the people's power. Because when you were talking earlier, you were talking about how people were bought and some of the things that transpired on ground. The election was seen as a clash between federal might, as alleged by PDP, I must emphasize, because and the will of the people. So was this election truly a reflection of federal might overpowering the people's will, is my question, or was it a balanced contest between political actors?
Well, Kiki, your double-barrel questions are indeed seminal. You really want us to dive back. In 2016, if you remember, the same feverish manner with which we saw Adams Oshiomole campaign for his candidate in this 2024 election was the same manner he campaigned for Godwin Obaseki. Obaseki was not very visible in 2016. It was Adams shuttling everywhere to ensure that he had a successor. And that was what the play was in 2016. And so if you talk about godfatherism, then Adams became the godfather. And it was actually, if you remember, elections were postponed. It was postponed, giving funny excuses about the bomb blast and insecurity in Edo State. But everyone who observed the election understood why that election was postponed at that material time. It was a commissioner of police, an assistant commissioner of police in Abuja, while the stakeholders meeting was going on in Benin. The chairman of INEC, the DIG in charge of operations, and the DGSSS were all seated in that stakeholders meeting when an assistant commissioner of police in Abuja announced postponement of that elections. And we had mobilized to Edo State, all of us prepared for elections, and it was postponed. And that was the election that brought in Godwin Obaseki. So if you talk about federal might, if you talk about godfatherism, in 2016, it was at play. In 2020, by the time Godwin Obaseki and his then estranged godfather, Adams Oshiomole, had fallen out, pitching tents with, it was more like a family division, and Philip Shaibu, his deputy governor, who is also a godson of Adams Oshiomole, had pitched tent with Obaseki. And if you remember vividly, when Obaseki won the election in 2020, opposition political party, going straight to the villa, a federal executive council was opened to receive Godwin Obaseki. So because of the estrangement, the challenge that his then estranged grandfather was having with the likes of the APC apparatchik at that point in time. So why am I going back there? If you then check the history and the trajectory of the pattern of interventions, whether godfatherism or not, is been a pattern since 2016 to date. So Adams is a member of the APC, a senator in charge, and he sees himself as a patron saint of the APC in Edo State. And Obaseki wanted to be an emerging godfather for his own trends also within that division. And so it was more a chess game between those apparatchik that I talked about and a desire to teach an estranged Godson some lesson. That's my reading of what played. So, but in all of that, what is important is that you have to go to the polling units. Elections have left INEC offices. Power has been restored to the people, and that is why politicians are commodifying the votes, are going to the people to buy them. These same monies that were used to now, induce voters were what was given to EOs and electoral officials to bring ballot papers to the homes of, politicians in the past. And that was why you had things like ballot snatching, because when you snatch the ballots, you then take the one that has been stuffed in the house of a politician and return it back to the polling unit. But now, what you have, because of the incremental progress that has been done in the electoral process, you've seen a shift from all of that to now centering all activities, including manipulative activities, in the polling unit area. And so at the end of the day, you have to either purchase the votes or you persuade them, And for Edo, like I've said, whether in 2016 or in 2020 or in 2024, money has been a very, inglorious infliction on the electoral process in that state.
For your submission right there. And earlier when you were talking about the insecurity. Let me touch about the security oversight, because 43,000 security agents were deployed for the election. A number of disappropriation to regular security needs, rising questions about the necessity. The outgoing governor, Obaseki, decried this weeks before the election. Do you think, sir, that the heavy deployment of security forces ensured a fair election, or did it create an intimidating environment for voters to come out to vote? That's my first question. I'm sorry that I'm giving you a double barrel question, because I'm trying to manage time, and I really don't want to interrupt you while you're talking, because you were really sharing a lot of insight. Earlier when you're also talking, you touched on INEC's integrity, in handling the election, particularly its use of beavers and accreditation delays, raised concerns about the credibility of the results. How would you assess INEC's performance in this election? Or what can be done, maybe that's my question, to address the inconsistency and delays in future elections?
Well, let me be straight up with you. For security, it can never be too much. It's better to err on the side of caution. What were the risk analysis for the Edo election? If you remember, I prefaced my conversation with the fact that many had predicted that it will be Armageddon, that there will be collapse of, violence and the rest of them. And the challenge always when we discuss is security and insecurity is to say whether it is adequate. Now, what can be? Remember that what is at stake in Edo State was not just security provisioning for the land. You also had to provide for marine security, because there are communities that are riverine in Edo State. And more importantly, the security mapping had shown that there were, use of extraneous security, arms, especially those owned by the state, and small arms were running wild in the state. There were also pre-election conversations about the activities of cults in the state. So it's important that the security agents had to mobilize heavily into the state to forestall. Yes, it can have some effects in terms of intimidation, but it is better. As we speak, in the whole of the electoral process, we did not see, the kind of violence that was predicted. There were skirmishes. I mean, of course, it's a competition. There were skirmishes, but not the kind that now, if you say it is that security is not important, do you then mean that there were no people who were planning to unleash violence? it is possible that they were deterred by the the presence of police. And in time past and in other elections that I've had the privilege of observing, you will see concentration of security agents in the city. And then when you go to the backwater communities, you will not find, the number of security that is required to man polling units and even the outer layers. But I think the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, which comprises that 43,000 that you said, the DSS, the security defense, the army, and the rest of them, put in a superlative performance, in my view, in terms of security provisioning. But in terms of looking the other way, when the inducements we are going on, that is something that we need to deal with in future. Now, for INEC, I have said very clearly that they had 13 activities that they undertook getting to the Edo election. And the E-Day activity is the 13th. 12 of those activities had gone on smoothly, because I have told you that election is a process and not an event. So if there are 13 activities and 12 of those activities had gone on smoothly, then it is important that we continue to repose confidence in that institution. The remaining 13th activity, there are other stakeholders whose activities, whose behavior or misbehavior impacts on the outcomes that you eventually see. For instance, if you are talking about late opening of polls, you will see that in many places, INEC officials were ready. By that I mean members of the youth corps, those young men and women, in many places in the rack centers were there by 7 a.m. In the particular rack center where I observed, they were there much more than 7 a.m. The people the security agents who had the responsibility of escorting those materials from the rack centers to the polling unit did not appear in the polling unit until about 8:30, when is the actual time for opening of polls. And the vendors, the transport vendors, the road transport workers, NURTW and NATO, were in that particular rack center provided only 2 vehicles. And those vehicles were doing shuttles to the different polling units. And it takes about 40 minutes to set up in a polling unit. So if you then look at punctuality index for the election, you will not domicile entirely the blame on the INEC officials who were ready to move, but those who had other responsibilities subverted their ability to do so. So if you talk about intimidation during collation, why would a governor, for instance, by 1 a.m., 2 a.m., leave his house, he's not a party agent, to go to the collation center to go say he wants to speak to the resident electoral commissioner? That is an act of intimidation. Why should observers not allowed to come into collation? Some of them were even tear gas. Some of them had to sustain minor injuries. The people doing that are the people we give comfort to. We do not put their legs on the fire. The political class and their candidates and their misbehavior and behavior impacts on the integrity of the electoral process. When you talk about manipulation, the manipulations are done at the polling unit level in connivance with their party agents. Then when they come to the collation center, they do not even come from results mined from the polling unit. They address press conference talking about manipulation that is not evidence.
All right.
So the challenge is sometimes we have allowed the politicians to lead the narrative and confuse even what they know through the law, because they have processes that they can take to challenge irregularities when it happens. But they rather play to the gallery, capture the imagination of the people, and not give the impression that it is the electoral management body that is the problem, when they themselves really are the real issue for integrity of elections in our country.
All right, let's end it there, are the real issues. And I think I agree with you to some extent, but I wish we have time now for me to touch on the voter apathy and low turnout. But we'll go on a quick break. When I return, the conversation will continue. Stay with me. This is Real Talk with Kike. All right, glad to know you're still right there with us. In case you just joined today's show, today's conversation is about the just concluded Edo State gubernatorial election that ran on Saturday, 21st September. And we've been having conversation dissecting the entire election, what went down, the anomalies, what we got right, what we got wrong collectively as a nation. I've been privileged to have Mr. Ezenwa who have been throwing light on the issue at hand. He is the chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms and member board of Yaga Africa. And on the live show, he has been giving us real talk on the event that took place because he was actually on the ground. And he has touched on the future of Edo State, electoral issues at hand. But right now, I think it's important for. But before then, sir, many thanks for all your submission thus far. But let me quickly use this opportunity to open the phone lines. For those who are watching me right now, remember that you can be part of this conversation via our studio number 0811-8888-113. And it will be showing on your screen very soon. And of course, we're streaming live on Facebook and both on Real Talk with Kike and of course on Silver Bell platform. Sir, many thanks again for all that you've shared thus far. But I must ask you, because election rigging and vote buying, well, will I say vote buying allegations of votes in Nigeria with prices as high as 20,000 naira per vote, or some people are saying 15,000 naira, surfaced, reflecting on the ongoing problems, I like to use the word challenges in Nigeria's election. How can Nigeria combat the deeply entrenched culture of vote buying, and what role should civil society and the government play in all of this? My second question again is the fact that I want to touch on the role of the judiciary in election disputes, because with PDP and LP, contesting the results and planning legal actions, the judiciary is once again, central to resolve election disputes. How confident are you, sir? Or will I say, are we in the judicial process to resolve this controversy surrounding the Edo election? Because what should be done, maybe that should be the question, to strengthen the electoral dispute resolution?
Okay, let me start to say that the judicial oversight is part of the electoral process. It's constitutionally recognized that when there are disputes, you have to go to the judiciary. And the challenge is that the judiciary does not say, please come. It is the people who subvert the electoral process, who subvert the constitution, that, either through that they win elections or they lose elections. If you win, you go to the judiciary to say, I won fairly, squarely, according to the rules. If you lost, you say, I was shortchanged and there has been a breach of the constitution. So many times we like to position the judiciary as the bad guys. And that for me is not right. I will tell you this, madam, for free, that the politicians do not invest resources in understanding the guidelines and the law that guides even the contest they are playing in. I will give you one example. Take the role of the party agents, for instance. When I started, I told you that election is polling unit centric. That is that activities at the, in any election happens at the polling unit. And every political party has a responsibility to send party agents to polling units to represent their interests. Indeed, in the guideline, or in fact, the Electoral Act, the party agent is like the candidate. He is the eye, the leg, the ear of the candidate in that place. And he even can interfere in the process. That is why INEC sends monitors, resident electoral commissioners to rove in case party agents raise serious issues at the polling unit. They can immediately deal with it and interfere. But let me tell you this, the political parties do not have organic party agents. Their relationship with their party agents is transactional, in the sense that because during election, somebody can be party agent for party A in this election and be party agent again for another. The parties have no members in the sense in which they can be ideologically linked with that party to be able to defend their interests. So many times, through collusion, whether community collusion or other forms of collusion, sell out their parties at the polling unit by signing even, results that are probably even manipulated. And then they come to collation centers and is a different person who was not at the polling unit that is coming to defend that party at the collation. Meanwhile, the party agent at the collation center had already traded his party for peanuts. Now, if the political parties understand what this means, they will invest in training their party agents as the most important leg of mandate protection. So that's important for the question that you asked about vote buying. The second issue I want to raise is that you do not buy votes. You can't manipulate a process in the place that you are not strong. If the people of an area feel that and convince themselves that the people who are contesting election represent their well-being and interest, it is going to be difficult for them to transact. But what happens is that these are the same family. People see these people as the same family who are just changing buttons and quarreling over spoils of office that does not impact the ordinary people. So sometimes in their mind is like, so what's the difference? Let's cuckoo, as we say in local parlance, let's just take our money and go off. While that is not a defense for the malfeasance that is, it's important to understand the state of mind of the people, that they do not have a connection with what the parties are throwing up and the arguments that they are bringing forward. So how do we remedy that? The first way to remedy that is for people who are in government to realize that they are there for the betterment of the people. The second is that election is not an event. It is simply a process. The real determination for election is governance. Civic groups and organizations must awaken to their responsibility to hold government accountable. And if they hold government, for election is just this one day activity, you have 4 years stretch to govern. All of us go into recess. We are active during this election. Immediately results are announced and the court determines the process. All of us go into recess. If we want things to change, we must hold those who, whether they manipulated themselves to power or they got it through the ballot, we still have a responsibility to put their feet on the fire and demand that they work in our interest. That will reduce vote buying. Vote buying is a response to the reforms that have taken place in the electoral process, but much more. And you are trying to put it in hardship, the hardship in the land. I tell you this, 2016, there was vote buying. Dibokosebe in Ondo, Dibokosebe in Oshun and Ekiti, meaning collect money and make soup. They were not in 2024. They were not in 2023. So the argument that it is people trade their votes because they've been pauperized will only resonate to the fact that people tend to want to excuse crimes. Inducement, voter inducement is a crime under the Electoral Act. Kike, if somebody picks your phone and runs away with it and say, I am hungry, will you let that person go because the person says I'm hungry? When we hoist the regime of excuses when it has to do with the public, but when it is private, we want the law to take its course. So the challenge is also a challenge of law enforcement we should have law enforcement, officers do their work when it comes to voter inducement. But incidentally, in many cases, they look away or they are even part of the process themselves.
Many thanks again for that submission right there. This might be my last question to you because of time, so that we can move to the last segment of the show. Let me touch on the economic hardship and voter sentiments, because with your submission now, I feel that despite the economic hardship under the current administration, the current government, the APC candidate that won the election raising questions about the electoral decision making. Why do you think the economic hardship failed to significantly swerve the voters away from the ruling APC in this election? And the role of campaigns and media that Olumide Akpata well ran, in terms of the media campaign, didn't translate into votes, because Olumide Akpata's campaign resonated with so many people, including me. So, and I was wondering how come it couldn't translate into vote, underscoring the limited impact of media presence in Nigerian politics today. So I'm asking again, what role do you think media campaigns and candidates' visibility plays in Nigerian election, and why might they have that failed voters in Edo State?
Politics is local. Every politics is local. Forget about the issues at the national level and all that. There are issues of zoning in Edo State. The two political parties zoned their candidate to a particular zone of the state, the central, I think. Asue Igodalo and Monde Obekwolo are all from the same senatorial zone. There seems to be a consensus among Edolites that power should rotate to that place. So Olumide Akpata, coming from the same place where Godwin Obaseki was an intrusion into that zoning arrangement. So that is something that you must consider. The second point will be the infighting within the PDP itself. If you remember, there is a faction, Dan Obi faction, and another faction within the same party. You know that the members of the House of Representatives were not in sync with the governor. The governor was, at loggerheads with, if you like, the politicians in the state. And you can also look at performance. If you tell me that you take care of your children very well, when I see them, I will know that you take care of them. So if you say I have performed, the people will reward your performance. If they don't think you have performed, they will also punish you for non-performance. So these are very important. For the Labour Party that you talked about, it can excite you because you are on Twitter, you are on television. Every billboard, almost all the billboards I saw in Edo State were written in Pidgin English. What does that tell you? What resonates with the people? In your PowerPoint presentations and your technocratic disposition does not dig deep to the majority of the people who live in that environment. Okay, so that campaign can resonate with Twitter. In fact, he won the election. Olumide Akpata won the election on Twitter. He won the election on internet. But the people, he himself yesterday was saying that he probably didn't have time enough, and it is his first time.
Unfortunately, I have to interrupt your line of thoughts. We've run out of time, but I must say many thanks, for all your submission thus far. Definitely, I will be inviting you back on this show for you to throw more light on issues that affect us all. But quickly, before I let you go, sir, there's the last segment of the show that we call Trending Stories. These are stories that bind us as Nigerians and as Africans, and this is where I have an opinion as a host. And my first trending story today is that of the fatal shooting of a Nigerian man, Kolade Johnson. And first off, I want to say a big kudos and thank you to Segun Awosoya. He has been an extraordinary advocate when it comes to calling for justice. He has remained steadfast on the issue of police brutality over the years. He's doing a great job with consistency, and this country needs distinguished gentlemen like him. There are many issues on our plate as Nigerians. Even the media will stop we'll stop reporting some cases because news come out every day. However, it remains dedicated, the likes of, Mr. Wosoya. So he remains dedicated, and the sad death of Kolade Johnson is another painful reminder of the unchecked power and impunity that has taken root in the Nigerian police force today. Despite all the promises of reform, especially after the turmoil around SARS, it seems like very little has changed. This act of police brutality shows that the government is stepping back from fixing the key issues, especially when it comes to checking the mental health and emotional stability of people recruited into the force. How can we expect peace when we don't even know if the people meant to protect us are mentally fit for the job? Beyond the troubling act of violence, the welfare of police officers is also a pressing issue that I'm bringing to fore that cannot be ignored. Over the years, we have witnessed the degradation of working conditions, in terms of the remuneration, the general well-being of officers. Many officers are purely equipped, underpaid, overworked, creating a fertile ground for corruption and the use of power. This failings, directly contributed to the inability of the police force to uphold the oath that they took to serve and protect the nation. Rather than adequately training and supporting officers to serve with integrity, the state has allowed these issues to foster compounding the already tense relationship between the police and the citizen. I'd like to keep it real on this matter, regardless of my relationship with the force, but the government must focus on fixing these issues by improving the living conditions, providing mental health checks, and training police officers to respect human rights and act responsibly. I just want to use this medium to also, sympathize with Kolade Johnson's family and all those who have lost loved ones because of police violence. These deaths are not just numbers. They are proof that the system is broken. I stand with those calling for justice, hoping that the tragic events will push the government to bring real and lasting change and solution to our country, Nigeria. I think this is where I have to lay my submission. But quickly, before I come to you, let me bring the second trending story to fore. That is the Dangote refinery operations and subsidy exposure. And, we keep crying for accountability in our country. With what my guests have said today, we don't seem to get the importance of that accountability that we are crying for. Honestly, will I say, honesty does nothing but exalt a nation. But sorry to sound scriptural right now, but that is the truth. If Dangote refinery hadn't come into the whole play, these inconsistency and anomalies may not be publicly figured out. We keep treading on the controversy whether the subsidy has been removed or not, or it has not been removed. Dangote refinery now make people or Nigerians have a better data on what the nation produces and consumes in terms of petroleum products. Now, we are calling on the government before there is more damage to their integrity and accountability levels. So, to come out and let Nigerians know what the true state of subsidy is, I think it's important for us to actually keep torchlighting that. Nigerians have been plunged into economic hardship since the coming of this administration. And we can see the inflation affecting everyone, businesses further pushing us into poverty while affecting the value of naira in forex markets. Nigerians deserves, I repeat, Nigerians deserve the dignity of knowing what is actually happening when it comes to subsidy in this country. We can't afford to keep seeing new revelations about the subsidy forms or a private body, which is a shame. If Dangote refinery didn't come to play, is that how we will be kept into the dark? I ask in pain. To the international communities, we are just a bunch of jokers. The government needs to do better with accountability, with transparency on sectors across board. Unfortunately, I don't want to keep going on and on, but sir, if you can give your submission in 1 minute. In 1 minute, sir, what's your take on the trend is? Okay, unfortunately, I just learned that we lost our guest, but many thanks, sir, for all your submission does fine. Indeed, we had another edition of Real Talk with Kike, or a very awesome show today because of our resourceful guest, Mr. Ezenwa, the chairman, partner for electoral reform and member board of Yaga Africa. And I think this is where I draw the curtains of the show. Till I come your way on Thursday, remember to catch me live on Inspiration FM 92.3 tomorrow, and be kind to one another. Bye now.